Hey y'all, it's Sheridan from Southern Couture. This week I wanted to do something a little different than writing an article. I wanted to do a more face-to-face personal video. If you're in the Houston area, I know most of my followers are. You are dying to see another face from being stuck in the house for a week or longer than that. And I know a lot of us are still recovering and doing what we can to help everybody else that may have been affected. I know each of us knows at least one or two people who were affected in one way or another from Hurricane Harvey, and just want to kind of share my reflections and my thoughts. I was going to write an article, and I was just like, it's just easier to kind of just verbalize sometimes your thoughts versus just writing them down. It's just depending on y'all's feedback, I might do more videos and kind of mix it up between videos and my usual articles. So I wanted to get in a little bit of just the reflections of dealing with Hurricane Harvey. I know a lot of us, we all were, like I said earlier, affected differently. And with that being said, we all took different lessons from it. You know, I've had friends who lost everything to friends who didn't even get an ounce of rain. And then you have everybody in between that. And I know for me, just being observant and just, seeing everything going on around me, I took a lot in, a lot of reflection. One thing for sure, I know in the beginning stages, I was like, okay, the hurricane's coming, in Houston, we don't take weather too seriously, and the news wasn't really just hyping it up either, so nobody was just taking it super seriously. And I was like, okay, well, I'll be with some family, I'll get some work done, read a book that I've been trying to finish for like 3 months now. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. I've been wanting to finish it for 3 or 4 months now, and I had a list of all these things I wanted to do, and just because of all the things that were going on, I was probably watching the news too much. I hate watching the news, but I actually watched the news like the entire few days, and I'm sure some of my family members were tired of me giving all these updates, but it was really hard to focus on anything else just because you see so much going on around you, knowing people who have been devastated, who are, evacuating, it really made the focus go from worrying about ourselves and the things that we felt like we had to get done, and really coming together as a community and sharing posts because so-and-so's family member needs to get, rescued, or sharing posts because we know someone who lost everything and needs clothes. So it was really a time for me to do some reflection, and I feel like God was really telling me like, hey, I know you're super serious about your work, about your business, but sometimes you need to just rest and spend time with your family and just use the time to rest and take care of yourself. And I'm a huge self-care advocate. So I think I do a lot of self-care. I know I do as much as I can. I probably can do more. I don't think there's a such thing as too much self-care. But it definitely was a time for me to kind of reflect and say, okay, work can be done next week. These things can be taken care of next week. Like, it's time to just kind of rest and relax and take care of myself and take care of my family. And just the revelations through that as well is just from talking to other friends and other, even strangers that I've met. And as a collective, I know that most of us have come to terms or grips with the fact that, we have an attachment to material things. I know that's, cliche thing. Everybody, that's always the thing that people kind of realize after tragedy is that, oh my God, we place so much, so much effort and so much value in material things, and our lives and our families' lives are what's important. So of course, that's always going to be the undertone, the lesson that's always learned in any tragedy. But just even just deeper into that, I feel like a lot of us were pushed towards our purposes. I know personally, I have a loved one who pretty much lost everything, and they were dealing with something, or dealing with a challenge within themselves of wanting to push forward and move out of the city and do different things. And we really had to talk about it, and it was good for us both to kind of come to the conclusion that sometimes God pushes you into your purpose because we're too scared to take that leap. And I think that that's happened more often than not, and it doesn't always take a tragedy for that to happen, but I think just being able to recognize those things immediately and not having some of those lessons take years to realize, I think that's something that just society as a whole and the collective as a whole, that we're moving towards being more aware and conscious of when we're supposed to learn a lesson and trying to get through that lesson faster than letting it drag out for a couple of years. So I know that was something for me, just to be observant, and you kind of see how it was the same tragedy, but everybody was affected differently, and heard different messages from that. Even I had some friends or people I knew of who hate their jobs, and their jobs were completely like flooded out. And I think sometimes those can be blessings in disguise, because it's like, okay, you hated your job, or you hated this, or you wanted to move and, do different things, and now you really have the opportunity to do it. Unfortunately, it came about from a tragedy, but there's always a silver lining in everything. And I'm an optimist. I'm a realist as well, but I know I can be an optimist and sometimes probably overly optimistic at times. But there's always a silver lining. I mean, there's always a silver lining. There's not, there's never a time where things are not going to end on a good note, and everything has a purpose and a lesson behind that. So that was one thing that I just kind of took away from the storm. The other thing is just self-care. I know something I personally felt challenged with, is that Houston showed out so much when it came to volunteerism and how many opportunities there were, to the point where, there were lines. There were places where they were turning away volunteers and donations because Houston and the surrounding areas supported us so much. And for someone who, I do volunteer, I work with a couple of nonprofits, and I really, the first day I was like, I really want to go out there, but it was just so heavy. It's so heavy. And I guess my message to other people is that you don't have to feel bad about taking time for yourself. I volunteered when I could, and then there were some days where I was like, you know what, it's already been a long day. I went to work for a few hours, maybe volunteered and sorted some clothes for a little bit. Do what's best for you. The message in all of that is that, different strokes for different folks. Everything's different. Some people were working. Some people worked where they weren't able to volunteer because their jobs, they needed to, for their livelihood. Some people had the time or the resources to be able to volunteer their time, or volunteer, tons of resources monetary wise. And then others may have only been able to say, okay, I don't have the time, but I can clean out my clothes, or I have time to run to the store and get some toiletries to donate to somebody else. So never compare. I know we always say don't compare our blessings to others or our struggles to others, but never compare how much you're giving to another person, because, God knows your heart. The Most High knows your heart. God knows that, just because you could only give 2 hours here and somebody gave 10 hours there doesn't make them any better or you any less, or vice versa. That was something that I've had to kind of just talk to myself about as well, just because it was, you get on Snapchat and you get on Facebook or Twitter, and it's so many volunteer opportunities everywhere. And you see all your friends doing things, and you're just like, wow, I wish I could make it, but X, Y, and Z, or I wish I could do X, Y, and Z, and you might just not have the time or the resources. And self-care is important. I don't think that we realize that, we want to help and be helpful to others, but you have to take care of yourself first. Something that we always talk about just amongst some of my sisters, we have a group chat, and we have a retreat coming up in November. And something that we talk about a lot is that you can't give from an empty cup or empty vessel. And we always relate that to the instructions they give you on the plane, that if the plane goes down, you have to put on your mask before you help your neighbor. And that just goes back to show you that you do have to still continue to take care of yourself, even if you may not realize it. I think we've all been affected, in more ways than we probably realize right now. Just because, like I said, I know a lot of us probably were watching the news the whole weekend. We were on, Instagram or Twitter the whole weekend and keeping up with the storm the entire time. And that's draining on us as well. That's pulling a lot of our energy out. And just going forward, the next few months are going to require a lot. We have 3 storms right now out there in the Atlantic and the Gulf. There's all kind of crazy things going on in the world, and I know a lot of us, we have a servant's heart, and we want to give any way we can, but at the same time, you also have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and that you're protecting yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, all of that, whether it's getting rest, whether it's turning your phone off and putting your group chats on silent for a couple of hours, whether it's turning the news off, whatever it is that's going to be beneficial to you, and your health and your wellness, because at the end of the day, there's still a lot of work to be done. I have a lot of other topics that I want to talk about, but I feel like it's better to separate them and I can have more videos for you guys to see in the coming weeks. But just wanted to emphasize, just practicing self-care and taking care of yourself, and knowing that what you are doing is enough. Everybody pitches in and helps every way they can, but you also have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And just taking some time to reflect. I know that was the common thread between a lot of us over the last weeks and the last few weeks and the upcoming weeks as well, is that it's a lot of time of reflection. It's a lot of time. Just because we had so much time in the house during the storm, and just because some of our neighbors and our friends are still recovering, it's just causing a lot of us to reflect on areas of our lives that, change is needed, or areas of our lives where we need to step up and really own our power. And I've been feeling very strongly about just owning your power and owning who you are, owning your needs and your wants. But I want to make a separate video about that. But I did just want to share some encouraging words and just encourage everyone to take care of themselves and get the rest that they need. Spend time with your family, turn the TVs off, turn social media off, cook yourself a good meal, put a face mask on, go get a haircut, whatever it is that's your self-care. Everybody's self-care is different, and it varies. Today you might want a glass of wine, and tomorrow you might want to go run a mile because it's going to make you feel better. So there's no perfect recipe for self-care, but definitely want to encourage everyone to stay uplifted and encouraged, because I think the next few months are going to be intense and interesting because we're dealing with so many things, nationally, locally, etc. And it's just important to figure out what's important to you. And that sometimes involves self-care. Those things change. What's important to you today might not even matter to you next month. And like the old saying goes, 5 years from now, will this really matter?